We've got a long way to go, but I'm optimistic. Ryan Curley, Dean Legge, another edition of Riding Home brought to you by Red Zone over in Athens on Clayton Street. Ryan, look, this is what Kirby does in the springs, plural. He talks about how, Georgia is in the position they're in. They've got to get a lot better. I do want to focus on this a little bit, though, because I think what he's saying, there's a couple of different ways. First of all, he's right. They do have a long way to go. And the thing I want to talk about is that was not a great end of the season, but he says I'm optimistic. Is he optimistic about the players he's got, the machine he's built, the coaches? What's he optimistic about? This is coming from a guy who doesn't always show optimism. He always seems to be in coach mode, which, by the way, doesn't mean you have to be, pessimistic. He's saying I'm optimistic. Why is he optimistic?
Yeah, well, I think part of that is just combating the negativity he brought to that press conference, right? I mean, he got there and look, he was ticked off. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a difference between, you had a long night at practice and he just straight up wasn't pleased with what he saw on Tuesday. I don't know if he feels that way about that was practice number 3 or 4. I don't know if he feels that way about the handful of others before that, but look, he knows the players that he brought in. He went and sat in their living rooms when they were 16, 15, 17-year-olds, and a lot of them are younger. And he said it feels like about half the team is in their first year at Georgia, whether they're a freshman or whether they transferred in. And obviously there's guys like Nate Frazier who still hasn't been there for an entire calendar year. But I think he's optimistic just because he knows he has really good players. You heard him last week talk about how he has no doubt he has the best coaching staff in the country. I mean, he's a confident person that he's mentioned a couple times over the last couple weeks. He knows what's going on with his peers. He's talking about other schools, other programs. Whether he's talking to the head coaches or just knows people at him, he feels that Georgia's in just as good a place as any, and probably in the conference is how he feels. So I think the optimism comes from, look, this is how it usually is at the beginning of the spring. It's not a refined product quite yet. We're not in fall camp. We're not at the beginning of the season yet. He knows what it takes to right the ship and to get these guys going. And I think he's just confident in the players that he's brought in. He wouldn't have brought them in if he didn't feel that way about them.
Well, I've got your attention. Check out the link down below from our good friends at BetMGM. Use the promo code MEGABET, MEGABET, to get a chance of up to $1,500 on bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. The link is right down below. You can bet on any number of things. Futures for the NFL, futures for college football. They got baseball betting, all sorts of things that you can have fun with. Let's be responsible about it. Don't miss out on this. It's a really cool thing. Again, from our buddies over at BetMGM, use the promo code MEGABET, MEGABET. Get a chance for up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Check it out. Links right down below. Yeah, there's always a couple different ways to look at things. 24 was a tough year. They won the league. And, right now where they're at is they've lost a guy at quarterback who's played a bunch of snaps for them and has been very successful at Georgia. They lost a guy at running back that they were hoping could be really, really good for them. And there were moments where he was really good for them, but for the most part, he didn't do what I thought he would. The offensive line was a disappointment. The wide receivers, so he's got a lot of new right now, whether it's Gunner, whether it's Ryan Puglisi. You've got new wide receivers you're going to have to depend on. But he says he's optimistic. Ryan, they've got about 5.5 months to get this stew right. They're throwing all the potatoes in there, get the red wine, the chicken stock. It's going to take time to get where. Well, in my case, I throw butter in too. It's gonna take time to get to where you're not going to be able to just eat it in an hour. You got time. The good news is they have time. I think there's you and I were talking with Mackenzie Brooks from CBS not that long ago, and sometimes her conversations keep coming back because she's not, she doesn't cover the team every single day. And so her perspective is everybody's changed. Like this college football, there's not, there's a lot more. I'll put it to you this way in NCAA basketball terms. We're about to hit the big dance. Georgia going to play on Thursday. There's more Dukes than there are, I don't even know, than Clemson's. Like Clemson's an old basketball team. And they're a good basketball team. They're smart, all that stuff. Cooper Flagg and the other freshman for Duke, whose name escapes me, number 12. Wait, you muted yourself.
They've got about three or four of them that
You so
play
my
significant minutes.
Yeah, so Duke's situation is different than Clemson's, which is maybe why Clemson beat them. But Duke has the entire, they had the entire season to get to this moment, and now their stew is ready to be eaten. How will it taste? And there's going to be a lot of stew making, and the ingredients aren't as obvious as they were in the past.
No, they're not. Like, we talked about it a few times. They've got more to figure out this offseason than they've had in a few years, and that takes time to gel and mesh. And I know that they deal
But
with.
we think they do. We think they do. I mean, here, stick with me on this. I think you're right, but let me be the contrarian. Let me be. They sort of know what they have with Gunner. They probably have a starting running back. I don't know if they probably have backups. It's the offensive line to me. They got wide receivers, and wide receivers don't take forever to get kind of. It's the offensive line, man. If that's what you're talking about. And then is the kid from Savannah Christian as good as I think it was Warren Brinson said? I mean, I don't, we don't. There's a lot we don't know. We say this every year, but they do have a lot to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think on the offensive line, I think Kirby is probably part of his optimism is, yeah, we lost four starters to the NFL, but Drew Bobo has started games for them. Micah Morris has started games for them. So the offensive line is not going to be completely
No.
inexperienced, but it will be a new group of five. And like we've seen the last few years, they'll probably figure out a way to rotate it more than just five deep, more, have other lineups to prepare for the future like this. And that's why they rotate. And that's why they do that was so they're in this situation. Not everyone is raw. I mean, I think it's just about gelling. The teams that won championships a couple years ago, a lot of them were just together for a long time. You think about how
But let me
many
ask you this. Let me ask you this,
all these
Ryan.
older players.
Let me ask you this. Is that world of college football gone now? Because Ohio State won it with with guys that have been around, but if they don't have that quarterback and some of the influx that they had on the defensive side of the ball, those were new guys.
Yeah, I mean, they brought in one of the best running backs in college football. They had, new quarterback. They brought
And
in one of the best defensive players in college football, and Caleb Downs. So
Georgia won it. Georgia won it with a transfer quarterback in 21-2. Just saying.
yeah, that's it. So, I don't know that those days of college football are necessarily gone. It might take a couple of years to get back to that, and I think they're still going under. There's still some legislation changes for how all this money is going to be involved. I don't think it's set the way it's been the last few years. I think that things will probably be a little bit more structured moving forward. But that was part of Kirby's frustration on Tuesday night. Was he's talking about how players are throwing their hands up. They're not ready to be coached hard, and they're just not used to it. And a part of it is he just feels like this team is a lot younger and a lot more raw. And he said he asked them how many of y'all have been through four of these springs, and there were barely anyone that stood up for that. So that's I think where part of the figuring it out comes is there's not that many Dalen Everetts and Oscar Delps on this team that were around for a long time, two, around to see what it takes out of these older guys to win at an elite level. There's just not that many of those guys on this team, and they're going to have to become those guys. So there is more to figure out.
There's more to figure out, but this is just a new situation we're in. You get Noah Thomas. You have new receivers. You have new playmakers. They're going to have to meld in. You have what do you say? 33 people are new. I mean, even back in the day,
I think.
What was it?
I think you said 33%.
33%. That's probably correct. Which, even back in the day, that was about what it was. I mean, it wasn't like, these aren't like, 55% of our roster is new. Some places are like that, but most places are not. And Georgia's not going to be that way. I mean, it's not going to be Deion Sanders at Colorado rolling everybody out. What were you going to say?
It's when you look at this specific year of transition for Georgia, you look at everything they lost on, like, still, even though they've got experienced offensive linemen, 4 out of 5 is a lot. That's a big change. A quarterback that was productive for 2 years, that's a huge change. cycling in new receivers on the defensive line, pretty much the entire defensive line.
There's a lot of moving parts that have never.
Couple of their starting safeties from the last couple of years. I mean, there's a lot that's changed.
Yeah, it can't be that everybody's in love with Dan Jackson the way they are, and losing him doesn't matter. It can't be that you have probably 3 top 40 picks, if not 3 first rounders on defense, and you don't notice them when they're gone. The good news is you recruited really well. KJ Bolden's really, 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 really good. Okay, he just is. You have Everett on the outside. It's not like they don't have players. They do. CJ Allen, the linebackers are not a problem. So, so it's just like you want a guy at every single level. You want a guy that can cause problems at every single level, including the offensive line. So I'm saying, just structuring it through running back, you want a problem. Quarterback, you want a problem. Offensive line and people on that line for the offense, which is the receivers and the tight ends as well. You want a person that's a problem on the defensive line, person that's a problem on that. You want a problem every single place that you've got so that you can take advantage of Nakobe. You want to deal with, you don't want to double Jordan Davis. Okay, Jordan Davis gives you problems. You double him, you got to deal with Nakobe Dean. So they're going to have that stuff all the way up and down. But I think he's optimistic, Ryan, and I think that's. He says we got a long way to go, but I'm optimistic. I mean, Kirby's done this for a while. Maybe he knows something that we don't. Hey, thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video.